Jack stood in front of the window, staring out at the sprawling cityscape. In just 2 days, he was supposed to be married to Lydia, the woman he believed was the love of his life. The wedding preparations were in full swing, with family and friends arriving from out of town, and the final touches being put on the ceremony. Yet, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The nagging suspicion had been building for months, ever since Lydia started coming home late from work, often with flimsy excuses about meetings and errands. Jack tried to dismiss it, chalking it up to pre-wedding stress. But today, while Lydia was out getting her final dress fitting, Jack decided to follow his intuition. He sat at Lydia's desk, her laptop open in front of him. It felt wrong, invading her privacy, but the knot in his stomach urged him on. He typed in her usual password, which she had used for years, and the screen unlocked. Jack hesitated for a moment, then began sifting through her emails and messages. What he found shattered his world. There were dozens of emails and text exchanges between Lydia and a man named Victor. The messages were explicit, detailing a torrid affair that had been going on for 6 months. They planned secret rendezvous, shared intimate photos, and worst of all, discussed their future plans together. Jack's eyes widened as he read the latest email thread. "Just 2 more days, then I'll marry Jack, take my half of his fortune, and we can finally be together without hiding. I can't wait to start our new life," said Lydia. "I'm so proud of you, my love. And don't forget, we'll have a little one to share it with soon. Did you tell him yet?" said Victor. "No, not yet. I'll let him believe the baby is his until the divorce. It'll be easier that way," Lydia answered. Jack felt his heart pounding in his chest. He clenched his fists, the betrayal cutting deeper than any wound he'd ever known. Lydia wasn't just cheating. She was planning to ruin him, steal his money, and raise another man's child under his roof. The realization sparked a rage in Jack that he had never felt before. As he continued reading, Jack's mind started to race. He knew he couldn't confront Lydia now. She was too cunning, too manipulative. Instead, he would play along, acting the part of the oblivious, loving fiancée until he could devise a plan for revenge that would leave Lydia and Victor regretting their treachery. Jack closed the laptop, his mind made up. He had 2 days to prepare, 2 days to turn Lydia's world upside down. It was time to show her that she had underestimated him, and that betrayal came with a price. Jack spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze of anger and determination. He knew he had to be careful and precise with his plan. Confronting Lydia directly could lead to her manipulating the situation to her advantage. He needed to gather more information and set his revenge in motion discreetly. That evening, Lydia returned home, beaming with excitement. She twirled around in her wedding dress, asking for Jack's opinion. It took every ounce of his self-control to smile and tell her she looked beautiful. Inside, his fury burned hotter with each passing second. After dinner, Lydia went to bed early, claiming she was exhausted from the day's activities. Jack waited until he was sure she was asleep, then quietly left the house. He drove to the one place he knew he could get the help he needed without raising suspicion. His best friend, Marcus. Marcus had been Jack's confidant since college. They shared everything, from business ventures to personal struggles. If there was anyone Jack could trust, it was Marcus. He arrived at Marcus's apartment and knocked on the door, anxiety gnawing at him. Marcus answered, his expression shifting from surprise to concern as he saw the look on Jack's face. "Jack, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." Jack stepped inside and wasted no time explaining the situation. He told Marcus about Lydia's affair, her plan to marry him for his money, and the baby that wasn't his. Marcus listened in stunned silence, his jaw clenching in anger on Jack's behalf. "Man, that's messed up," Marcus finally said. "What do you want to do?" Jack's eyes were cold and calculating. "I want to ruin her. Marcus, I want to make sure she regrets ever crossing me, but I need your help." Marcus nodded without hesitation. "Anything you need, I'm here for you." They spent the next few hours devising a plan. Marcus, who had a background in tech and security, would help Jack gather evidence and set up the traps. Jack's goal was to expose Lydia and Victor's deceit in the most public and humiliating way possible, ensuring there was no escape for either of them. They decided to start by hacking into Lydia's and Victor's social media accounts. Marcus quickly set up a program to monitor their messages and emails in real time. It didn't take long for them to find more incriminating evidence, including explicit photos and plans for their future together. Jack felt a twisted satisfaction as he watched the pieces fall into place. The more they dug, the clearer Lydia's betrayal became. She was ruthless and calculating, using her charm and beauty to manipulate those around her. By the time Jack returned home, it was nearly dawn. He crept into bed beside Lydia, careful not to wake her. He stared at the ceiling, exhaustion tugging at his eyelids, but his mind was too wired to sleep. Tomorrow would be the last day of pretending. After that, Lydia and Victor would face the consequences of their actions. As he finally drifted off to sleep, Jack allowed himself a small, bitter smile. Lydia had no idea what was coming, and that was exactly how he wanted it. The next morning, Jack awoke with a sense of grim purpose. Lydia was already up, bustling around the house, finalizing last-minute wedding details. She greeted him with a bright smile and a peck on the cheek. Acting every bit the loving fiancée, Jack reciprocated, masking his inner turmoil with practiced ease. Jack spent the day meticulously playing his role. He attended to calls from the wedding planner, greeted out-of-town guests, and even endured a round of pre-wedding photos with Lydia. All the while, he was in constant contact with Marcus, who was making swift progress on their plan. That afternoon, Lydia went out for a spa appointment with her bridesmaids, giving Jack some much-needed time alone. He headed to Marcus's apartment to go over the final details. Marcus greeted him at the door, ushering him inside with a sense of urgency. "Jack, you need to see this." Jack followed Marcus to his computer, where a slew of incriminating messages and photos were displayed. The evidence was damning. Lydia and Victor's affair was laid bare, with dates, times, and explicit exchanges. It was more than enough to ruin them both. "I've set up everything we need," Marcus explained. "The photos and messages are scheduled to post to Lydia's and Victor's social media accounts at exactly 7 p.m. tomorrow, just as your wedding reception starts. It'll be public and undeniable." Jack nodded, feeling a cold satisfaction. "Good. Now, let's make sure we have all the backup copies ready, just in case." They spent the next few hours compiling the evidence into multiple formats: digital files, printed copies, and even a few USB drives. Jack wanted to be prepared for any contingency. He wasn't just aiming to expose Lydia. He wanted to ensure she couldn't worm her way out of this with some slick excuse or sob story. As they worked, Jack's mind wandered to the next phase of his plan. Exposing Lydia was only part of it. He needed to make sure that she and Victor faced real consequences, ones that would leave them with nothing. Marcus had already contacted a few key allies, trusted friends who could help spread the word and ensure the scandal reached as many people as possible. By the time Jack left Marcus's apartment, dusk was settling over the city. He felt a grim resolve, knowing that tomorrow would be the turning point. He returned home to find Lydia in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. She looked up and smiled, her eyes twinkling with happiness. "Hey, you, how was your day?" she asked, her voice sweet and affectionate. Jack forced a smile, masking his true emotions. "Busy, but productive. Everything's coming together for tomorrow." Lydia beamed, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. As they sat down to dinner, Jack's mind was already racing ahead, planning every detail of his final act of revenge. He went to bed that night with a sense of grim determination. Tomorrow, Lydia and Victor would pay for their betrayal. Tomorrow, the facade would shatter and the truth would come crashing down. Jack drifted off to sleep, ready for the confrontation that awaited him. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing in Jack's heart. Lydia was already up, bustling around the house with an air of excitement. Jack could barely stand to look at her, but he knew he had to maintain the facade for just a few more hours. "Good morning, love," Lydia chirped, practically glowing with happiness. "Can you believe it? Today is the day." Jack forced a smile, hiding his contempt. "Yeah, it's finally here. I can't wait." As Lydia left for the venue to oversee the final preparations, Jack took a moment to gather himself. He knew this would be the hardest part, keeping up appearances while knowing the truth, but he had no choice. He had to see this through. Jack spent the morning going through the motions, preparing for the ceremony. He donned his tuxedo, greeted guests, and posed for photos. All the while, his phone buzzed with updates from Marcus. Everything was set, the posts were scheduled, the evidence was ready, and their allies were on standby. As the ceremony time approached, Jack found himself standing at the altar, waiting for Lydia. The guests filled the pews, unaware of the drama about to unfold. Jack's parents sat in the front row, beaming with pride, while Lydia's family chattered excitedly amongst themselves. The music started, and everyone turned to watch Lydia walk down the aisle. She looked stunning in her wedding dress, a vision of beauty and innocence. Jack felt a pang of bitterness, knowing it was all a lie. As Lydia joined him at the altar, she gazed into his eyes with a look of pure love and devotion. Jack's stomach churned, but he kept his expression neutral. The ceremony began, and Jack listened to the officiant's words with a sense of detachment. He felt like he was watching a movie, everything happening in slow motion. Finally, the moment arrived for their vows. Lydia went first, her voice trembling with emotion. "Jack, from the moment I met you, I knew you were the one. You've been my rock, my best friend, and my greatest love. I promise to cherish you, support you, and love you for the rest of my life." Jack's heart ached with the weight of her lies. It was his turn. He took a deep breath and began, choosing his words carefully. "Lydia, you've brought so much joy into my life. I've loved you with everything I have, and I promise to always be there for you, to support you, and to protect you." As he spoke, he caught Marcus's eye in the crowd. Marcus gave a subtle nod, signaling that everything was in place. Jack felt a surge of resolve. It was time. The officiant asked for the rings, and as Lydia's bridesmaid handed hers over, Jack felt a sudden clarity. He slipped the ring onto Lydia's finger, his mind racing with the final steps of his plan. "With this ring, I thee wed," he said, his voice steady. "With this ring, I thee wed," Lydia repeated, her eyes shining. The officiant smiled. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Jack leaned in and kissed Lydia, his mind already on what was to come. As they turned to face their guests, the crowd erupted in applause. Jack's parents hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. Lydia's family cheered, completely oblivious to the truth. As they walked back down the aisle together, Jack felt a grim satisfaction. Lydia had no idea what was coming. The reception was about to begin, and with it, the public unveiling of her betrayal. Jack whispered in Lydia's ear, "Enjoy the moment, darling. You won't forget it." She smiled, thinking he was talking about their wedding day. But Jack knew better. This was the beginning of the end for her and Victor. The reception was a grand affair, held at an elegant venue with twinkling lights and lavish decorations. Guests mingled, glasses clinked, and laughter filled the air. Lydia was the center of attention, basking in the admiration of friends and family. Jack played his part perfectly, never letting his mask slip. As the evening progressed, Jack's anticipation grew. He kept an eye on the clock, waiting for the moment when the posts would go live. Lydia, oblivious to the storm brewing, floated around the room, thanking guests and posing for photos. Her happiness was a sharp contrast to the fury that simmered beneath Jack's calm exterior. At precisely 7 p.m., Jack felt his phone buzz in his pocket. He excused himself from a conversation and found Marcus standing near the bar, a satisfied look on his face. Jack nodded, and Marcus returned the gesture. It was time. Jack took the stage, tapping the microphone to get everyone's attention. The room gradually fell silent, with all eyes turning toward him. Lydia stood nearby, her smile bright and expectant. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jack began, his voice steady, "thank you all for being here to celebrate this special day with us. I want to take a moment to express my gratitude for your support and love." The guests applauded, and Jack continued. "As most of you know, Lydia and I have been looking forward to this day for a long time, but there are some things you don't know. Things I've recently discovered that have changed everything." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd. Lydia's smile faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Lydia," Jack said, turning to her, "you've been the love of my life. I trusted you completely, but it turns out that trust was misplaced." Lydia's eyes widened, and she took a step back. "Jack, what are you talking about?" Jack pulled out his phone, holding it up for everyone to see. "For the past 6 months, Lydia has been having an affair with a man named Victor. Not only that, but she planned to marry me, take half of my fortune, and raise his child as mine. Gasps of shock echoed through the room. Lydia's face turned pale, her eyes darting around in panic. "That's not true," she shouted, her voice shaking. "He's lying." Jack ignored her protests and continued. "I have proof, messages, photos, and plans they made together, and now everyone here will see the truth." He pressed a button on his phone, and within seconds, every guest's phone buzzed with notifications. Marcus had sent the evidence to everyone in the room, ensuring that Lydia's betrayal was publicly exposed. Guests began checking their phones, their expressions shifting from confusion to disgust as they read the messages and saw the photos. Lydia's parents looked horrified, her friends whispered among themselves, and Jack's parents stared in stunned disbelief. Lydia lunged for Jack, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this? How could you humiliate me like this?" Jack stepped back, his expression cold. "How could you betray me? How could you lie to me, use me, and expect to get away with it?" Victor, who had been lurking in the background, tried to slip away unnoticed, but Jack had anticipated this. "Oh, and Victor," he called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't think you're getting away either." All eyes turned to Victor, who froze in place. Jack addressed the crowd once more. "This man conspired with Lydia to deceive me and take everything I have. He's just as guilty." Victor stammered, trying to defend himself, but the damage was done. The guests turned their scornful gazes on him, and he knew he was trapped. Jack looked back at Lydia, who had crumpled to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. "This is what betrayal looks like. Lydia, you thought you could play me for a fool, but you underestimated me." He dropped the microphone, the sound echoing through the stunned silence of the room. Turning away from the wreckage of what should have been his happiest day, Jack walked out, leaving Lydia and Victor to face the consequences of their actions. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing. Jack took a deep breath, feeling a sense of liberation. The deception was over, and now he could begin to rebuild his life without the shadow of betrayal hanging over him. As Jack left the reception hall, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. The hardest part was done. Now, it was time to watch Lydia and Victor face the fallout of their actions. Back inside, the reception was in chaos. Guests were clustered in groups, whispering and exchanging shocked glances. Lydia's parents, visibly distraught, tried to comfort their daughter, who was still on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Victor was cornered by a few of Jack's friends, who demanded answers. Marcus joined Jack outside, a satisfied smile on his face. "That was intense. You okay?" Jack nodded, though he felt a mixture of emotions. Relief, anger, sadness. "Yeah, thanks for everything, Marcus. I couldn't have done this without you." Marcus clapped him on the back. "That's what friends are for. Now, what's the next step?" Jack had already thought this through. "I need to make sure Lydia can't spin this story to her advantage, and I need to protect my assets. Tomorrow, I'll meet with my lawyer to get the annulment process started and update my will and financial accounts." Marcus nodded. "Good plan. But tonight, let's get you out of here. You don't need to be around this mess anymore." They left the venue, heading to a quiet bar across town. Jack needed to decompress, to let the events of the day sink in. They found a secluded booth, ordered drinks, and sat in reflective silence for a while. Eventually, Marcus broke the silence. "You did the right thing, Jack. She would have destroyed you if you hadn't found out." Jack sighed, taking a sip of his drink. "I know, it just hurts, you know? I loved her. I thought we had a future together." Marcus nodded sympathetically. "It's going to hurt for a while, but you'll get through this, and you'll come out stronger." Jack appreciated Marcus's support. He knew he needed to focus on moving forward, but part of him still reeled from the betrayal. He couldn't help but wonder what had driven Lydia to such lengths, why she had chosen deception over honesty. The next morning, Jack met with his lawyer, Mr. Harris, a sharp, no-nonsense man who had handled Jack's legal matters for years. Jack laid out everything: Lydia's affair, her plan to take his money, the fake pregnancy. Mr. Harris listened attentively, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. "This is a serious breach of trust, Jack. We'll start the annulment process immediately. Given the evidence, it should be straightforward. We'll also secure your assets to ensure she can't claim anything." Jack nodded, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. I want to make sure she gets nothing, Harris. She used me, lied to me, and planned to destroy my life. She deserves nothing. Mr. Harris agreed. We'll make sure of it. I'll also recommend a public statement to clarify the situation. We need to get ahead of any narrative she might try to spin. Jack spent the next few hours with his financial advisor, locking down his accounts and changing passwords. He wanted to leave no stone unturned, ensuring Lydia had no access to his funds. Meanwhile, Lydia was dealing with the aftermath of the revelation. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages and calls from friends, family, and even the press. The scandal had spread quickly, and everyone wanted her side of the story. Victor, realizing he had no allies left, tried to distance himself from Lydia. He publicly denied knowing about her plans and claimed he had been duped as well. But the damage was done. His reputation was in tatters, and he faced the scorn of everyone who had seen the evidence. Lydia's parents were devastated. They had believed their daughter was marrying a good man, only to find out she had been deceiving him and them. They confronted Lydia, demanding answers, but she had none. She was caught in her own web of lies, with no way out. As Jack navigated the legal and financial steps to protect himself, he also began to heal. He leaned on Marcus and his close friends, finding strength in their support. He started seeing a therapist, someone Marcus recommended, to help him process the betrayal and move forward. Days turned into weeks, and the initial shock of the scandal began to fade. Jack focused on his work, throwing himself into his business projects. He found solace in the routine, in the tangible results of his efforts. The pain was still there, but it was becoming a dull ache rather than a sharp sting. One evening, Jack received a message from Lydia. He hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. Her words were pleading, apologetic, full of regret and sorrow. She begged for a chance to explain, to make things right. Jack stared at the screen, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of him wanted to hear her out, to understand why she had done what she did. But another part of him knew that he couldn't trust her, that any interaction would only bring more pain. He deleted the message without responding, a symbolic act of closure. Lydia had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. Jack was determined to move forward, to rebuild his life on a foundation of truth and integrity. As he looked out at the city lights, Jack felt a sense of hope. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but he knew he was strong enough to face it. He had survived the worst betrayal, and now it was time to reclaim his life. Weeks passed, and Jack began to find a new rhythm. The annulment was well underway, and his assets were secure. The public statement issued by his lawyer helped to control the narrative, painting Lydia and Victor as the manipulators they were. Support poured in from friends, colleagues, and even strangers who had heard about his story. Jack threw himself into his work, finding solace in the projects and goals that had once driven him. He realized how much he had lost himself in the relationship with Lydia, sacrificing his own dreams to support hers. Now he was reclaiming his life, and it felt empowering. One afternoon, Jack was in his office, reviewing a proposal for a major new venture. His assistant, Clara, knocked on the door and entered with a hesitant smile. "Jack, there's someone here to see you. She says it's important." Jack looked up curious. "Who is it?" "It's Lydia," Clara said, her expression sympathetic. "She says she needs to talk to you. Should I send her away?" Jack felt a surge of conflicting emotions. He had avoided any contact with Lydia since the day of the wedding. Part of him was curious about what she had to say, but another part of him wanted nothing to do with her. He took a deep breath, weighing his options. "Send her in," he finally said, his voice steady, "but leave the door open." Clara nodded and stepped out, returning moments later with Lydia in tow. Lydia looked different, worn, tired, and a shadow of the confident woman she had been. Her eyes were red from crying, and she seemed hesitant, unsure of herself. "Jack," she began, her voice trembling, "thank you for seeing me." Jack nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "What do you want, Lydia?" She sat down, clutching her purse tightly. "I know I have no right to ask for your time, but I need to explain. I need you to understand why I did what I did." Jack leaned back in his chair, his expression cold. "You betrayed me, lied to me, and tried to ruin my life. What could you possibly say that would make any of that better?" Lydia swallowed hard, tears brimming in her eyes. "I was selfish and stupid, Jack. I let my greed and ambition blind me. Victor promised me everything. Adventure? excitement, a life I thought I wanted. But it was all a lie. She paused, wiping her tears. After everything came out, Victor abandoned me. He used me just like I used you. I lost everything. My friends, my family's respect, my future. I'm pregnant and alone, with no one to turn to. Jack felt a pang of sympathy but quickly pushed it aside. You made your choices, Lydia. Now you have to live with them. I know, she said, her voice breaking, but I'm asking for your forgiveness. Not for my sake, but for the sake of our past. We had good times, Jack. I loved you, in my own twisted way. And I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused you. Jack studied her, searching for any sign of deception, but all he saw was a broken woman, paying the price for her mistakes. He took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. I forgive you, he said quietly, not for your sake, but for mine. Holding on to this anger won't help me move forward, but that doesn't mean I want you in my life. I hope you find a way to fix your mistakes and be a better person. Lydia nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Jack. I'll do my best to be better. Goodbye. She stood and left, the open door closing behind her. Jack sat in silence for a moment, processing the encounter. Forgiving Lydia didn't erase the past, but it did give him a sense of closure, a final chapter in a painful story. That evening, Jack met Marcus for dinner. They toasted to new beginnings, and Jack shared the news about Lydia's visit. Marcus listened, nodding thoughtfully. You did the right thing, Jack, Marcus said. Forgiveness is for you, not for her. It's about letting go and moving on. Jack smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. You're right. And now, it's time to focus on the future. As they finished their meal, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. The past was behind him, and the future was wide open, full of possibilities. He was ready to rise from the ashes and build a life that was truly his own. Months passed, and Jack's life began to flourish in ways he hadn't anticipated. The scandal surrounding Lydia and Victor slowly faded from public memory, replaced by new stories and events. Jack focused on his business, expanding his ventures and securing new partnerships. The success brought him a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in a long time. One sunny afternoon, Jack attended a charity gala organized by a business associate. It was a glamorous event, filled with influential people and lively conversation. As Jack mingled with the guests, he felt a sense of belonging and confidence that had been missing for too long. During the evening, Jack found himself in a conversation with a woman named Sophie. She was intelligent, warm, and had a quick wit that matched his own. They talked about their careers, shared a few laughs, and discovered a mutual love for travel. As the night went on, Jack realized he was genuinely enjoying himself. For the first time since the debacle with Lydia, he felt a spark of excitement about the future. Sophie seemed to feel the same, her eyes lighting up as they talked. At the end of the night, Jack walked Sophie to her car. They exchanged numbers, promising to keep in touch. As he watched her drive away, Jack felt a sense of hope and possibility. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. Back at home, Jack reflected on how far he had come. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been a turning point. He had discovered a strength within himself that he never knew existed, and he had rebuilt his life on his own terms. The next morning, Jack received a call from his lawyer, Mr. Harris. The annulment was finalized, and Lydia was officially out of his life. The news brought a sense of closure, a final severing of the ties that had bound him to his painful past. Jack decided to celebrate. He called Marcus, who was thrilled to hear the news. They planned a small gathering with close friends to mark the occasion. It was a night filled with laughter, camaraderie, and a sense of triumph. As the party wound down, Jack stood on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Marcus joined him, handing him a glass of champagne. To new beginnings, Marcus toasted. To new beginnings, Jack echoed, clinking their glasses together. A few days later, Jack and Sophie went on their first official date. They explored a new art exhibit, followed by dinner at a cozy little restaurant. The conversation flowed easily, and Jack felt a genuine connection forming between them. Sophie was different from Lydia in every way. She was honest, grounded, and had a sense of integrity that Jack admired. As they spent more time together, Jack found himself opening up in ways he hadn't before. Sophie listened with empathy and understanding, sharing her own stories and dreams. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront, Sophie took Jack's hand. I'm glad we met. Jack, you've brought a lot of joy into my life. Jack squeezed her hand, feeling a warmth spread through him. I'm glad we met too, Sophie. You've helped me see that there's still good in the world, and that I can trust again. Their relationship blossomed, and Jack found himself happier than he had been in a long time. He continued to focus on his business, but now he had something more. Someone to share his life with, someone who valued him for who he was. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led Jack to a place of peace and fulfillment. He had faced betrayal and heartbreak, but he had also discovered his own resilience and capacity for growth. As Jack stood on the balcony of his apartment, Sophie by his side, he felt a sense of contentment. The future was bright, full of endless possibilities. He had risen from the ashes of his past, stronger and wiser, ready to embrace whatever came next. With Sophie's hand in his, Jack looked out at the horizon, feeling a sense of hope and anticipation. The past was behind him, and the future was a blank canvas, waiting to be painted with new adventures and dreams. He was ready to begin this new chapter, knowing that he had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and a spirit unbroken, Jack stepped forward into his new beginning, ready to live his life to the fullest.